1100 watts at 120 volts AC, ATX 3.0 compatibility, all in the compact SFX form factor. Welcome to Machines and More. Power-hungry systems are ever more ubiquitous, and if you're looking to do such a small form factor build, chances are you are looking for a high-powered SFX power supply. Today we're taking a look at such a unit that just might fit the bill, the Cooler Master v1100 watt SFX Platinum power supply. If you're in a country with 230 volts household power, Cooler Master is also marketing this as the v1300 unit in those regions because of the higher efficiency at 230 volts AC, but they are the same power supply essentially. Big thanks to Cooler Master for supplying the review unit, and like all the other product reviews on this channel, it's not paid for, and the information presented here is based on my personal experience, testing, and research, and you can expect a fair and unbiased review. So Cooler Master has been marketing their VSFX 80 plus gold power supplies for almost 3 years now. And this one is an even higher powered addition to that family, which previously consisted of 550 to 850 watt units. When the 850 watt unit of that series came out, it was the most powerful SFX unit at the time. And this one absolutely continues that trend because, again, at the time of its release, it is the most powerful SFX unit available. Corsair and Silverstone, they have sub ATX form factor 1000 watt units, but those are a slightly larger SFXL unit, and so those are usually a little bit taller than SFX, 25 to 30 millimeters taller than SFX. In addition to being higher powered than the existing Cooler Master VSFX lineup, the v1100 also boasts an 80 plus platinum efficiency rating. 1100 watts is a lot of capacity for a power supply, not to mention an SFX unit, and it's not easy fitting the components into the smaller SFX spec, so this is quite impressive. Although shortly I will show you one caveat relating to the form factor of the unit. Late last year, some of you might have seen my review of the Lianli SP850, which came with what they called a 12 VHPWR cable, which I concluded how that really was just a 12-pin NVIDIA connector cable because it didn't have the communication pins that are a part of the ATX 3.0 standard. On that note, the other headline feature here is that this power supply conforms to the ATX 3.0 standard, and if you look at the connection ports on the power supply side, you'll notice that there is a dedicated 12 plus 4 port, and Cooler Master includes a 12V HPWR cable, a legit one, and this type of connection is capable of delivering 600 watts to the GPU through one single cable. For a 4080 or 4090 or other 12V HPWR GPU, this is the native connection you can choose to use to avoid any adapter cables. And this is the original cable. I'll show you the current one in the box. So let's take a look at what you get here. So in the box you get a cable pouch and the power supply in its own bag. The presentation here, it's quite attractive. You got good packaging for everything here. So it has a matte black powder coat finish. And you have 92mm FDB fan here, which looks identical to the one used on their other VSFX units. It vents out the top. One thing to note, you might notice that there's usually going to be a rocker switch, a rocker on-off switch at the top. This one doesn't have one. Maybe not a big deal, just be aware of that. Turn to the back. The labeling on the VSFX series is on the other face side of the unit. It's quite busy. There's a lot going on. So this is going to be in a noticeable location in your build. Consider masking it off. Some other brands, they choose to put the labeling on the side or something like that. That's a little bit less obtrusive, but that is here. Power supply is fully modular, so the user can attach only the cables that they need. A slight change here is the location of some of these ports, and the caveat to the size of this unit is you'll notice the ports, they stick out quite a lot from the bottom of the unit. A lot of SFX PSU designs, they have these ports protruding a small amount, but these are a good 5 to 7 millimeters more than usual, so it doesn't necessarily make it not SFX form factor, but just be aware of that if clearance is a potential issue in your build. The 18-pin motherboard cable is in the same location. as the other VSFX units. On the other VSFX units, the 10-pin motherboard cable is where the 12 VHPWR port is. With that added here, the 10-pin motherboard port moves adjacent to the other motherboard cable slot, which I prefer that way. Doesn't matter too much. Your HDD, SATA cables, your Molex power cables will go on the row right here as well. Top row here, the 12V HPWR 12 plus 4-pin port. If you have a 4000 series card that takes that, you can go straight to it without an adapter, and I'll show you the cable here shortly. Here you also have 5 PCIe or CPU ports, which is one more than you get with the V850 SFX. So for your over-the-top build scenario, if you need 2 EPS cables for your CPU, then you'll still have 3 PCIe ports for your high-powered GPU, like the 6900 XT, which was one of the GPUs that I tested it with. Or if you have something like a 4090 and you don't want to use the 12V HPWR connection for some reason, and you just want to use your adapter cable, then you'll need 4 8-pin cables. And theoretically, you will have enough ports to cover that need, and that'll work as long as you just need 1 EPS cable. Most mini-itx boards, they only have provision for 1 8-pin CPU power port anyway. So theoretically though, because let's take a look at the cables. So these are 16 AWG, they feel pretty thick. Some brands, they choose to use a thinner 18 AWG, and that can make a big difference when you are pushing a lot of power to the GPU, especially when you have dual-ended cables. This one doesn't, I'll show you that shortly here. 24-pin ATX cable here, 300 millimeters long. You have 2 450 millimeter EPS cables. One of these is a 4+4 pin end, and then the other one is a straight 8-pin end. You'll probably just run this one to your motherboard if you're using one. This is the marquee cable here. This is the 12V HPWR cable. Now you'll notice that this one has a right angle connection. The security of the connection is pretty critical with 12V HPWR, and recently some users and media outlets have reported melting connections, and that's often going to be because it wasn't inserted properly or it works itself loose. This right angle connection potentially makes that a little bit more secure. I'll show you the original cable that came with the unit. This is the first one. This is just a straight connector. When I tested this one with the 4070 FE card, it was with the straight connector. Okay. It pushes right out quite a bit, see? So it's really unwieldy because it has so much cable here. And despite this being a narrow card, the bulk of this cable pushed it right up against the side panel. So they did change this up, and the right angle connector actually amends that quite a bit. So it goes like this. So if there's no contact on this, that potentially eliminates some of the interference that can occur. That'll work itself loose, so that's a potential improvement there. The flip side is, though, you only have one feasible orientation, which, you know, to come the GPU from, and it's gonna be obvious. It's gonna look kind of clunky because it's gonna come straight down, and at least in the traditional layout, and it's gonna pop into your GPU there. Perhaps it's an issue in a sandwich case style. If you have a divider there, that could be a little awkward. You could flip it, run the right angle side on the power supply side, and then have it'll still fit with the motherboard connector there. And then you could just use the straight end and run that into the power supply, because these 12V HPWR cables, they are identical at both ends. So that's a viable way to get around it if you still want the straight end here. It's not ideal, but you know, it'll work. Granted, 12V HPWR connectors are not extremely widespread just yet, but it's just something to keep in mind with this. And I'm not a huge fan of the sleeving material on this, and you've got this heat shrink at the end. It's not extremely well polished, but you know, it's nice that they have this feature. I said in theory that this power supply can support a 4 8-pin port card, but here's the thing. 1, 2, 3. You only get 3 6+2 pin ended PCIe cables, 400 millimeters long, same as the 12 VHP cable, but these are single ended. And if you've ever seen the other VSFX units, they are dual-ended cables. In general, that's okay because there's 16 AWG, so they can, you can power a 3080 with just 2 of those. And it's cleaner with the single end, but you only have 3 PCIe 8+2 connections at the GPU end. And for the target user here with a 4090, there could easily be a reason that they don't want to use the 12V HPW connection. Perhaps it looks too clunky and they'd rather use their adapter cable. And then they could easily be needing those 4 8-pin cables at this point, as much of a rarity as this use case might be. And I feel that's a slight oversight here. From what I saw at Computex, the folks at the Power Business Unit showed a 12V HPWR 3 8-pin cable. Unfortunately, this doesn't come with one. That might have been a nice inclusion as well for those with something like a 3080 or 3090 that want to reduce the number of cables coming out of the power supply. But I think that particular cable, it's going to be on the new GX ATX power supply, so I don't think it's going to be a part of the SFX units going forward. And so there are also some other cables included, Molex Power, SATA Power. You get 2 SATA Power cables. But yeah, I've been using this one for quite some time now with a variety of components, and you might have seen it in the ATX versus ITX battle video, and I'm comfortable with its performance. Since it is so high powered, even when I've given it a very heavy load with something like a 3080, it's still only been at most 50% of the rated capacity. So that's an efficient level to be at. This power supply is 80+ platinum rated, and the peak efficiency, it's somewhere between 40 and 45% of the rated max load. Comparing an identical system with the v850 SFX and the v1100, I found a small but not insignificant difference in power draw at the wall, owing to the better efficiency of the higher capacity unit. 5 watts represent about 1.2% more wattage drawn from the lower powered unit. Let's take a quick listen to the fan noise. Alright, so now we're going to check out how loud this fan is. It is an always on fan, so it's never going to be off, which is actually a good thing, because then it doesn't spaz out when it suddenly senses some load and then start to ramp up really fast, just like the original SFX units from Cooler Master. But I'll give you the sound right now, and I've turned down the system fans in the test system here to kind of a minimum so that it can run feasibly for a few minutes at 20% on the CPU and the case fans, and the lowest I can get the GPU's fans to be at, because I will have that GPU on just to simulate a heavier load. We got a 6900 XT in the system, and also paired to the 7600X. Right now at idle, drawing about 80 watts. Okay, and you can hear the sound here. The fan is spinning. This is the kind of the minimum speed that it can run at. 420 watts on the system right now. And you can see, other than the coil line, which that's coming from the graphics card, there's not a real perceptible change in the fan speed. And what I'm going to do is going to quit the game, and the moment I quit it here, that fan will still be spinning at the same speed for a little bit, and then that coil line will go away. So let's try that. So what I noticed was that even with the system loaded at a decent load of 420 watts or so it was at, the fan really did not have a perceptible change, and you would normally see that ramp up quite a bit with a lower power unit like a 750 watt, 850 watt unit from Cooler Master. So there's no fanless mode. It's always on like all the other SFX units. Even at idle, you can hear it up close. Even when the system was loaded to about 450, 500 watts, you could hear that fan spin up a little bit faster, but it wasn't at the point where it was terribly noticeable, and certainly no odd fan spiking behavior like on some of the early SFX units from Cooler Master. One other thing I did notice as a consequence of the extra tall modular connectors, in their own case, the NR200, when you have the unit in the SFX position, it makes the cable clearance between the unit and the GPU pretty tight. So with the flow-through fan of the 4070FE being right up against that cable area, I did have to wrestle with them a little bit to keep it from hitting the fan. Unfortunately, the 12V HPWR is not an easy cable to cinch down because it's so thick and it's round, and it's just, be aware of that. 5 to 7 millimeters extra could be a very inconvenient scenario, but it's probably something you can work around. Just be aware of that. So who is this power supply for? Many power users can get by with a 750 watt or 850 watt unit. This just gives you a ton of overhead, which you don't need, and even NVIDIA's recommendation on the FE4090 is just an 850 watt unit, and even with some of the overclocked AIBs, you'll still be fine with that 850 watt unit in conjunction with an i5 or Ryzen 5 level of CPU power. However, in combination with higher CPU demands, such as a 13700K or 13900K, then that's when you start needing or having the potential to need the headroom from something like this when considering those transient or power spikes, if you will. And if you're doing such a high level build, with a 4090 OC plus 13900K, then I absolutely would not cheap out here, which you will pay for it though. The pricing of this unit in the US is $280 US, so it's roughly twice the cost of the V850. So definitely with something like this, it's more of getting it because you absolutely need it for your highest end build, not because you just feel like you want an ATX 3.0 power supply or just to save a few watts of power, right? So if you can get away without something like this and still have enough headroom, then I think you'll be fine. But all in all, 1100 watts in this SFX form factor, it's best in class now if you want native ATX 3.0 support in the SFX form factor for your 4080 or 4090 or compatible GPU. This is the one to get. The density that they managed to come up with in such a small unit is extremely impressive. Do be aware of the slightly taller connectors and that you might need to get an extra 8-pin cable. Other than that, I really like this unit. It's backed up with a 10-year warranty, so if you need this much power, I think you will be quite happy with it. So I hope you found this review helpful. If so, please give a like. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Links are down below. Thanks for watching.